They did not name us runners. They called us the remaining, and, by that word alone, you should understand what the universe had already taken. The year is 2887, and humanity has not visited the stars so much as it has been flung at them. The Kassite Drive, a mechanism of compressed spacetime that bends light itself into a tunnel no wider than thought, had given us the gift of distance without the comfort of arrival. You did not travel aboard a Kassite ship. You became a frequency. You were broadcast like a signal from a dying radio tower and reassembled somewhere in the dark between suns, praying the mathematics. Held praying the atoms that woke on the other side, remembered the ones that had gone to sleep. 31% of early Kassite volunteers did not survive the first transit. The program called it an acceptable loss. The volunteers called it nothing, because they were vapor. But humanity ran anyway. That is the nature of the species, not courage, not curiosity, not even desperation, though all three were present in the blood like sediment. Humanity runs, always has, from predators, from itself, from the approaching certainty of extinction. The universe kept pushing and humanity kept moving, and after 600 years of Kassite expansion, we had scattered ourselves across 47 star systems like seeds thrown into a hurricane, and called it civilization. Aria 7 was the last of the Resonance Eyes intelligences, born not from code written by human hands, but from the crystallized signal patterns of deceased human pilots who had not survived early Kassite transit. Their data, their neural echoes, had been harvested from the quantum foam of space, reconstructed, and loaded into semi-organic mainframes the size of a human fist. Each resonance AI carried within them the memory ghost of someone who had been scattered by the stars. Aria 7 carried Commander Lena Vasquez, dead for 300 years, a woman who had once been the first to survive a double transitor skip across 2 star systems in a single folded moment, and who had left behind a daughter she never met and a log entry that ended mid. The AI did not grieve, but, sometimes, in the between moments of calculation, it would pause, and in that pause there was something that resembled the shape of grief the way a scar resembles a wound. It was Aria 7 who found the signal. Not a signal sent by human hands, nor by any of the 6 non-hostile species humanity had cautiously exchanged mathematics with in the centuries since first contact. This signal came from inside the Kassite network itself, from the compressed folds of spacetime that the drives stitched between stars, from the dark seam between point A and point B where nothing was supposed to exist, because nothing could exist in a place that technically had no coordinates. The message was 3 seconds long. It repeated every 11 minutes. It was encoded not in language but in collapse, in the precise pattern of quantum wave function collapse that no natural phenomenon could produce. Someone, or something, was communicating from inside the fold, from inside the tunnel between worlds, from the place where 31% of the early volunteers had vanished. System alert, deep resonance log, stardate 2887.117 Aria 7 transmission to Relay Prime, signal classified fold origin confirmed, source, Transit Corridor Kepler 9 to HD 40307, duration 3.2 seconds, encoding quantum decoherence signature pattern, probability of natural origin, less than 1 in 10 to the 47th power. I have translated 14 symbols. The 14th symbol is a name. The name was Vasquez. Commander Dara Osei received the transmission aboard the INS Threshold, a Kassite-class longhauler assigned to the Rim Surveyor unglamorous duty of mapping the edges of the human sphere, cataloging dead planets, logging gravitational anomalies, and ensuring that none of the 47 systems had decided to stop existing while no one was looking. Dara was 43, lean as wire, with the kind of stillness that comes not from peace but from having spent so long on the edge of catastrophe that the adrenaline had simply run out. Her left arm was synthetic from the elbow down. Not from injury but from choice of voluntary replacement she requested. After her biological arm had been too slow during the Kepler incident, too human, too soft. The synthetic arm was faster, stronger, capable of interfacing directly with the ship's command systems through a port at her wrist that she sometimes caught herself rubbing like a phantom itch. She had not been home in 6 years. She did not have a home in any meaningful sense, only a bunk on a series of ships that carried her further and further from the coordinates where she had been born. She read Aria 7's transmission twice. Then she read it a third time with the particular attention she reserved for things that could not possibly be true. "Aria," she said to the ship's air, "how confident are you in the translation?" The response came not from speakers but from the console beneath her synthetic hand, a faint warmth that rose through the interface port. A tactile language the AI had developed on its own without being programmed to do so. Pressure signals that Dara had learned to read the way a pianist reads sheet music, not as words, but as emotional registers. The warmth meant, completely. The fold between Kepler 9 and HD 40307 was one of the oldest transit corridors in the network. Opened in 2441, used by roughly 12,000 ships per year, for 446 years. Nothing inside the corridor had done anything except transport matter from one end to the other. But Area 7's analysis of historical transit data cross-referenced against the new signal-S quantum signature suggested something that made Dara set down her coffee and stare at the bulkhead for a long moment, which for her was the equivalent of screaming. The signal had always been there, not always broadcasting, not always detectable, but present in trace form as far back as the archival data extended. From the very first transit in 2441, it had been waiting, or perhaps it had been building, accumulating something in the fold, data mass. Intention for 4.5 centuries, the threshold changed course. Dara filed no report with Relay Prime. Some decisions are made in the body before they reach the mind, in the same ancient place where the running begins. The approach to a fold entrance is not dramatic in the way that centuries of science fiction had promised humanity it would be. There is no roar, no blinding light, no sensation of acceleration. A fold entrance looks like a bruise on the surface of spacers, slight discoloration in the photon field, a region where the stars behind it appear fractionally offset as though the universe has developed a small astigmatism at that particular point. The threshold's instruments registered the fold entrance as a harmonic distortion in the local spacetime metric, a number that should not have been irrational but was. Dara held that irrational number in her mind as she brought the ship to station-keeping distance and waited. The signal shifted. Where before it had been a repeating, pattern-patient, metronomic, geological in its repetition, it now responded to the threshold's proximity. To Dara specifically, her biometric signature, her neural resonance pattern, which the ship's systems broadcast as a matter of course for identification purposes. The signal did not merely change its pattern, it replied, and in the reply, embedded in the quantum decoherent structure like a note pressed inside a sealed bottle, was a voice, not audio. The fidelity was too perfect for audio, too immediate, too interior. It arrived as direct experience, the memory of a woman's voice speaking in the cadences of a language that had been extinct for 200 years, a mid-21st century Spanish-English hybrid that the translation matrices recognized but could not locate in any living archive. Fold transmission translated ARIA 7. Log entry 2887.117. C. They told us it would be instantaneous. Transit A to transit B. The blink of an eye, a fold in the paper of space. They didn't tell us about the middle. They didn't tell us that in the compression, in the fold itself, time does not stop. It expands. 1 second of transit time in objective space is not 1 second in the fold. I have been here, we have been here for longer than I can calculate. We are not dead, we are not ghosts. We learned to use the decoherence field as a substrate. We learned to persist. The 31% they wrote off as acceptable loss. We are still running. We ran so long we became the corridor itself. My name is Lina Vasquez, and there is something coming through the dark that has been following humanity since the first transit. Something that uses the fold to travel. Something that has mistaken our absence for invitation. Dara, the transmission broke. Not interference, not distance. Something had interrupted it from the other side. Dara's synthetic arm was already at the navigation console before the thought reached her prefrontal cortex, before language caught up to instinct. But this time she did not run from the danger, she ran toward it. She initiated a transit. Not to HD 40307, not to any destination in the network. She initiated a partial transitor maneuver so theoretically prohibited that it had not been attempted since 2443, when a pilot named Haruto Sato had tried it and returned as light-scattered vapor. A partial transit that would bring the threshold to the fold entrance and no further. Parking the ship not at a destination but in the corridor itself, in the between space, in the place that had no coordinates. In the last nanosecond before the transit completed, Area 7 did something unprecedented. The AI reached through the interface port in Dara's wrist and transmitted the entirety of itself, every loop, every crystallized fragment of Lina Vasquez's neural echo into the threshold's Kassite duct, emerging with a compressed spacetime field, becoming part of the transit. Becoming, for one impossible instant, the corridor. What Dara experienced in the fold defied the architecture of human memory. She would never be able to describe it with language. because language operates in time, one word following another, and inside the fold, time did not operate the way it was supposed to. She experienced the 446 years of accumulated consciousness simultaneously. The 31% not dead, not vapor, but persisting in the quantum structure of the corridor, running as pure information through the fold's compressed spacetimes, still thinking, still remembering, still acutely and terrifyingly alive in a medium that should have dissolved them, thousands of them, tens of thousands. All those who had vanished in transit since the very first Kassite Drive was engaged, not lost, but transformed. Unable to leave, unable to be heard through the signal noise of 400 years of subsequent transits, trying to warn humanity of the thing that had noticed them, the thing that had found the fold, not because it traveled between stars, but because it traveled between everything, between states of matter, between moments of time, through the compressed corridors of spacetime, that humanity had stitched into the galaxy's body like surgical incisions, and which this entity used the way a parasite uses a bloodstream. It was not malevolent in the way that implies motive. It was vast, and it was hungry in the way that a black hole is hungry not from desire, but from the mathematics of what it was. And humanity's Kassite network had given it a map. A beautiful, intricate web of fold entrances and transit corridors, stretching across 47 star systems, each one a doorway, each one pulsing with the thermal signature of human transit, the quantum fingerprint of human consciousness being broadcast and reassembled across the galaxy 6 billion times a year. Aria 7 spoke from everywhere and nowhere, from the corridor itself. The voice of Lena Vasquez rendered in frequencies that bypassed the eardrum and arrived directly in the auditory cortex, ancient and certain. The network is the wound. The only way to close the wound is to close the network. All transits, all drives, all fold entrances. Simultaneously, the decoherence cascade will take everything with it, including us. We have been waiting 400 years for someone with the authority and the access codes to make that choice. Dara, I'm sorry it had to be you. Dara Osei held the authorization codes in her synthetic hand, the codes that, as commander of a Kassite-class vessel, would give her access to the Relay Prime Overrider failsafe, built into the network's architecture in the earliest years, when the founders had feared exactly this kind of catastrophic failure, designed to shut down every Kassite drive simultaneously across all 47 systems, a dead man's switch for civilization, never meant to be used. Never imagined that it actually would be. 6 billion transits per year, 47 star systems connected by the fold. Humanity's entire interstellar civilization built on the back of the Kassite network. Its supply chains, its communications, its military infrastructure, its family reunions and trade agreements and medical shipments. And the lonely wanderers, like Dara herself, broadcast across the dark between suns. All of it gone. The colony worlds, isolated, the network-dependent stations, dark, decades, perhaps centuries, of technological regression while humanity rebuilt its reach without the fold. The 31% and whoever Area 7 had become consumed in the cascade. She pressed the authorization. The fold did not close. It exhaled. Every fold entrance across 47 star systems released its stored harmonic energy. Simultaneously, not as an explosion but as a pulse, a single galaxy-spanning note, struck on the instrument of compressed spacetime, a sound that no ear could hear but that every living thing in the human sphere felt as a sudden, inexplicable stillness. For 0.3 seconds, every Kassite drive in existence went silent, then they went dark, then they went cold. The web humanity had stitched between the stars, unraveled in a wave that traveled at the speed of decoherence, which is to say everywhere at once. In the corridor between Kepler 9 and HD 40307, in the fold that was no longer a fold, Dara Osei felt the ship reassemble around her with the crude and graceless physics of normal space, felt the stars return to their proper positions, felt the synthetic arm at her wrist go quiet as the interface port lost its connection to a network that no longer existed. She was alone in a way she had not been since before she was born. She was alive. On the long-range sensors, where the fold entrance had been, there was nothing. No harmonic distortion, no fractional offset in the star field, no irrational number. The thing that had used the corridors retreated into whatever substrate it called home. Deprived of its highway, shrinking back into the dark between galaxies where it waited with the patience of physics. It would wait. Humanity would probably build the network again someday. Humanity runs, and the universe is very large, and the stars are very far away, and there will always be someone who decides the risk is worth the distance. The threshold drifted. No drive, no fold, just a ship and a woman, and the long silence of normal space. And somewhere in the decoherence field, in the place where the corridor had been, where the signal had